The Hushlife podcast is brought to you by absolutely nobody. However, if you own a smartphone and you want to save a little bit of money, make sure you check out the OnX Hunt app. It offers a variety of key features to improve your hunting experience. From nationwide public and private land boundaries, waypoints, lines, and all kinds of data you can share with your buddies, to 3D topical graphical maps you can explore while scouting for your upcoming hunt. Make sure you type in code HUSH. You will save 20% on all Hunt app opportunities. And if you want to take it to the next level, hit that elite button. It'll get you access to all 50 states. Absolutely, unequivocally, the greatest tool we take with us on every single hunt.
Hate to interrupt the podcast, guys, but I've got to tell you about the new All-In Snapshot digiscoping system. Allin.co has released a magnetic digiscoping setup that allows you to capture HD video through your spotting scope. It's that simple. Capture and share. Allin.co. Use the Hush code and save some cash.
What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Hushlife podcast. This week, we are yet again in the infamous Hush South Slopes warehouse, or shop, I should say, also known as Eric's Garage Filled with Antlers. But this week, sitting across the table from me is not Eric Chesser. We have the one and only B-Mac. What's going on, dude?
What's up, brother man?
What have you been up to? Where's B-Mac been this summer?
Oh, dude, I've been traveling around a lot. I most recently got back from Wisconsin, so I was took my dog Cruz back to do some training with a good buddy of mine, and so I spent close to 10 days back there with the objective of trying to get Cruz through bird and gun introduction, and then any additional kind of training components that I could, squeeze into that 10-day window. I've been doing my best to do a lot of the training on my own, but my buddy Josh was able to kind of help take us to the next level. So I would say that's been a big focal point. Just kind of enjoying the summer. Been shooting the bow a decent amount. Rehabbing. I got a bum shoulder. I've been kind of rehabbing with our buddy Preston and Mountain Physio, trying to solve that mystery. I don't know what I did to it, but working on kind of trying to get that back in shape. And just, dude, looking forward to the fall season, which is really coming up fast.
Oh, it's me and Eric were just talking about that. It's like basically 3 weeks away, 3.5 weeks away.
You guys, Casey, I think, has the first hunt kicking off, and then you and Eric have hunts kicking off simultaneously. His for elk, yours for mule deer. And those are less than a month away.
Yeah, man. I had a small panic attack this morning, just like getting my morning reps in. And I'm just like, my brother was over there this morning. He's just like, dude, like, are you ready? Like, you seriously ready? I'm like, I think so. And he's like, we got to just keep grinding. Like, we got to go scout some more. And I'm like, I know. It's just like, in my mind, I'm like, I just got to shoot. I got to be as confident as I can in my bow. I just got to be shooting better than I ever have. In the back of my mind, it's like, I'll find a deer. Like, I'll find a deer. It's like, I just got to have this confidence. But now it's to the point where it's like, all right, it's time to have some deer hit list, and it's go time.
Right between, like, you figure, okay, you got your shooting.
Yep.
To consider, especially for those of you guys starting out with an archery hunt. Are you feeling as confident ever in your equipment walking into the season, especially if you have, like, what would be considered in my mind a higher quality tag?
Yeah.
It's hunting, so we've experienced this a lot more recently. On paper, some of the tags you get, you have high expectations and hopes, and they don't quite materialize. Maybe 5 years ago they were great, but maybe not today. So you got that whole component on it. Then you've got, like, the gear aspect.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of it might be collecting dust in your garage or storage shed or something, kind of pulling all that out, optimizing. Do I have the right stuff? Do I need to get anything else? What type of hunt am I going on? Then you just have almost that, like, anxious anxiety and anticipation of what could be found.
Yeah.
On my hunt. To your point.
Yeah.
Am I going to find that dream buck, that once in a lifetime buck? Well, what are the dynamics going to be? What's the weather going to look like? All these variables that you start kind of just obsessing about leading up to the hunt. So it's a pretty fun time of year to be
like Christmas
approaching. It really is, man. And I'm excited just to see what the year brings for our entire team. We've got some pretty cool tags that we're all excited about. It'll be similar how we've done it last year with the way we share the footage and the films, but hopefully, with any luck, we'll have some good, entertaining, exciting things to share.
Yeah, we may even have a little twist, something a little new or different going simultaneously, or maybe a little bit.
Be technically before the
Yeah,
actual hunt films
yeah.
release.
So stay tuned for that, guys. But this week, in lieu, I guess, of opening season, uh, archery elk hunting, and kind of sticking with our whole series that we've kind of done, the Untold stories is kind of what we're calling it, or that whole kind of dynamic of these longer form podcasts that we're able to really dive into details and lessons learned of some of our most
Iconic elk
iconic.
hunts. Yeah.
That's a perfect word. Iconic hunts. Yeah.
I like to consider it like a bit of a a hunt breakdown or the hunt details. Stuff that you can't necessarily capture in the essence of a film. This gives us these formats have provided a way to kind of dive in a little deeper, tell about some of the preparation, the backstory, what we did well, maybe what we did wrong. And so far, I've really enjoyed them, from Eric and Matt talking about the Firebowl to Casey and Braley talking about her giant public land monster. I was fortunate enough to be a part of that one. It's been super cool to kind of relive some of these hunts, and I'm excited to kind of dive into this one.
Yeah, man. So kind of the goal of this podcast, kind of like BMAC says, is dive into some of the more details or relive some of these. As a Hush fan, when a lot of these hunts took place, I was able to see them as a viewer or as a fan, and I was able to really form a pretty, I guess, solid opinion on like the hunt and like how I felt about it. And like I always have had questions on some of these iconic hunts. And I've always kind of wanted, this is what makes this series so fun for me. I can ask questions that I've had, like, dude, what did you learn? Or what were you thinking in that moment? Or like, what were you guys talking about when the camera turned off? Were you like, man, like, son of a gun? Or were you like, it's okay, like, we'll think through this type of thing? So this hunt is extremely dynamic. And for those of you just listening, we will do our best to explain this, but it might be better viewed or a better viewing or listening experience if you could take the time to sit down and turn this video or this podcast onto your big screen and or on your phone and kind of watch the YouTube version of this, because with these untold stories, at the same time as we're talking about this hunt, we kind of relive the video and go through the video and ask certain questions about what I see going on in the video and what I remember. So we're diving into this week is this your highest scoring bull or your biggest bull?
It is my biggest bull.
BMAC's biggest archery, biggest bull period.
Biggest bull period, just so happened to be with a bow.
Archery, Wyoming bull elk, giant 7x7, black antlers, some of the sickest elk footage of all time.
It really is.
And
Logan was filming it, and he did such a great job capturing this high intensity moment.
dude, this is I'm gonna give you guys a little sneak peek of what's about to take place.
Yeah.
Just ads. Anyways, why the ad is playing. This little sneak peek is kind of the epitome right there. For those of you just listening,
Just let me paint the picture.
paint the picture.
What we're showing here is what literally resonates and is ingrained in my brain for eternity when I think about this hunt. And we'll dive into more specifics of kind of like the setup, the scenario, and what took place leading up to it. But this is what you dream about when you have a high quality tag in your pocket and you've put in a lot of energy and effort, is a scenario like this with a mature bull that the second you see it, you are like, that's a shooter. And then it just comes and, plays out the way it did. And like a lot of hunts, the ups and downs and the emotions, but the lighting and this bull's symmetrical straight 7 rack is essentially backlit against this sagebrush skyline. And man, talk about a sweet visual. It's just seeing a big old 7-point frame cresting over this ridge.
So we're gonna dive into your emotions and thoughts in this scene, but I want to just to tease a little bit for you folks at home who might be dreaming of an elk hunt out west or are fortunate enough to have an elk tag in your pocket of any weapon. this is kind of, I think when we all close our eyes and are just daydreaming about what we would love to experience, this is kind of, in my mind, what most of us are probably picturing, just a picket fence of a rack, skyline coming in on a string. So let's rewind a little bit. So you guys get to this unit, and BMAC is the king of e-scouting and all things logistics. I just put that out there. So I've watched this video, and I think I did this re-edit too, so I was able to mess around with some footage that maybe was not seen or ever seen. But here, BMAC is shooting his bow, getting his bow all, well, I guess shot in, making sure everything was fine on the drive. And you're getting set up in a spot that in your mind was your number one spot, correct?
Not exactly.
Okay, let's hear it.
So I'll rewind it back a little bit further. So I grew up in Oregon. Many of you know this, some of you don't. I grew up hunting with my dad predominantly. The first hunts I ever did in my life for big game were with a bow in my hand. And the limiting factor was my ability to pull back the bow. Probably could have hunted a few years earlier if I would have been a little stronger as a kid. So everything I've always come to know and love about big game hunting is largely rooted in archery. So I grew up hunting Eastern Oregon with my dad, my uncle, and all of my childhood memories from when I was probably 8 years old and got to start going with my dad are just so strong in so many positive ways. And back then, you could carry a bow in Oregon and essentially shoot anything. Could shoot an elk, and back at that point in time was either sex. You could shoot a buck deer, could shoot a black bear, and you could shoot a mountain lion. So you'd buy basically what they called the sports pack years ago, and you had a chance to shoot anything in the woods. So I spent a lot of years chasing around elk and deer and other things, but predominantly elk. Shot a good amount of, spikes and small bulls from the time I was 15 till the age of about 20, 22. And really kind of developed my passion for elk. I wouldn't say we were the greatest hunters on earth by any means. We did a blend of still hunting. We did a little bit of calling. And then at some point in time, we transitioned and started setting up tree stands, which in hindsight, I kind of think that reduced my skill progression as a hunter. I was, as a kid, I was really good at getting in the middle of elk.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, though, we didn't have rangefinders. I'm dating myself here. The ones we did were just so antiquated. Like, you'd have these two blurry images and you'd roll the dial and you'd try to bring the images together till it was clear. And then you'd look at the dial and then say like, oh, 35 or 40 or whatever.
I've never even seen one of those in person.
They're so old. Like, trail cameras had these massive giant batteries in them. I could visually remember the one my dad had. The archery equipment certainly was older, not the greatest in the world. I was shooting fingers, 3 fingers.
That's rad.
And then just a static, pin 20, 30, 40, 50. But dude, 50 yards back then was
like 100 now.
It was so far back then. So, but I got good at getting in the middle of elk, and I felt like I was pretty confident sneaking in there. Now, I didn't always execute the shot because a lot of the equipment wasn't helping me out, but I always found myself in elk. And then we went to the tree stand thing. The tree stand thing was super cool because you're just so incognito. And we killed a lot of elk out of tree stands where they just had no idea you were there. And it gave you a different perspective. But I do think in my development as a hunter, in hindsight, I wish I would have not done as much tree stand hunting and continually kind of crafted like the spot and stock still hunting. The first elk I ever killed was with my bow. I snuck in on him, shot him at 25 yards. It was a spike, and I was like through the roof, stoked.
Yeah.
I was shooting like an old school Browning bow, Easton 2117 arrows. They were the autumn green. I still actually have the arrow I killed that bull with, and they were the satellite 125 broadheads.
That just sounds loud.
Oh, so much so. And I can remember like hiking down into camp and, sharing the fact that I shot this bull with my dad. And I think I was 18 or 19 years old, and he was so excited. So we were able to get back up there, find him, and just a super cool experience. And so that just developed my love for elk. Through the years, though, I'd say, man, I didn't ever have a great success rate once I left Oregon, but it did get me wanting to do more things. So I started applying for other states back in 2010. And at the top of the list were the places like New Mexico, like Wyoming, like Utah, and hoping that over time I'd start to accumulate enough points to where I could start cashing in on these new opportunities to hunt different places. And so far, it's worked out pretty well. I am sitting on a lot of points in several states still. So as point creep is taken into effect, it's gotten more challenging to draw certain tags. But with this particular hunt, I was able to pull a tag, had a good amount of points, more than 9, less than 15, kind of in that category. It wasn't expected, so I was a little surprised when I drew it in all the right ways. And I think if you guys have ever, participated in the application process, some tags, you feel pretty good about. Some you're just trying to get lucky.
Yeah.
And having that email, pop through where it says successful is a pretty incredible feeling. And for me, that's where everything started. So like Matt said, I have a tendency to dive into the weeds a little bit more on like research and detail and data and scouting. And this I kind of felt like was my very first opportunity at like a unique tag with a place that has a good amount of elk, possibly like a good quality of elk as well, to really just dive in headfirst and see what I could find out about it leading up to the hunt. So probably the hardest I've ever worked prior to a hunt.
Okay, so I'm gonna pause you right there. So as a viewer, or as, let's say, putting myself in the shoes of a new elk hunter or somebody who's never really hunted out of state, out of a couple of these tactics, what would you say is at the top of the list? Would you say like e-scouting?
Yeah, I'll walk you through my whole strategy.
Okay, yeah.
The way I look at it is it's like a funnel. So if you can visualize a funnel, at the top of it is wider. And to me, that's like you got to draw the tag, right? That's at the top of the funnel. And then at the very bottom of the funnel, it's much more narrow. And that would be opening day. So how do you like slowly start gradually getting closer to opening day? And what are you doing to get there? We talked a little bit about it, right? From prepping with your gear and, shooting and things of that nature. But from a pure standpoint of learning an area that you've never hunted before, my strategy begins at the top of the funnel. So draw the tag, and then I like to go research old hunt forums. So there's a lot of them historically. You got like Rock Slide, Hunt Talk, Monster Muleys. Man, there's a whole pile of them out there, but there's a lot of data shared, unfortunately, frankly, that's public consumption. So I generally will go dig into the archives, spend a lot of time searching around keywords for trying to populate intel and information about the area that I might be hunting. And shockingly enough, there's quite a bit of data that's just out there.
Yeah.
It takes work to get to it because you got to go search. So that's strategy. I reached out to the biologist of the unit, which is, I feel like one that a lot of people talk about, but I don't know how many people do it.
Actually do it, yeah.
Yeah. That was actually really enlightening. Gentleman I spoke to 2 different people, but they had a lot of great intel. And my advice would be to reach out to them after you know a little bit more about the tag that you had versus at the very beginning when you don't know anything.
Yeah, give them some options. Like, would you hunt
Yes.
X mountain, Y mountain, Z
Right.
mountain? Like, yeah.
So having a little intel prior was super helpful because they were helping me make decisions that I had already researched with a little clearer path. Comparatively, if I would have just reached out day number 1, hey, I don't know anything about this tag. I just drew it. What do you suggest? I think they're going to honestly reward people that they feel have put in the effort and the work, more so than if you just called cold and started asking questions about something. But that was really great. They kind of helped me further understand the dynamics of the unit, the bull to cow ratio, the herd dynamics. Really just were able to help answer some of the questions I had about specific areas, like you mentioned, Matt, like different ranges or areas, and whether or not anything I could pull from them would help me gain an angle or an advantage that, okay, I should probably try here. So that was a step I naturally researched with my network. So
Mhm.
anybody that I know that may have knowledge, or maybe somebody they know has been in this particular area and talked to. That proved to be valuable as well. Did a lot of time spent on Onyx scouting the area. I like to use the various tools that Onyx has as well, which gives me a chance to draw various shapes and objects of areas I want to identify. I do it in different colors too. So I might have like an area that's all outlined in black. Typically, we'll have like an access point or two and a general zone of landscape I want to go explore.
It's a work of art. I've been fortunate enough to have BMAX share some of his areas that we're going to hunt as a team,
Yep.
and it's a work of art. It's definitely taken some time. Look,
Oh man,
places I've seen and been on, and I'm like, goodness, like this is hours
it's
in the beat lab.
I like to do it on the desktop as well. It's a little easier. But my reasoning behind it is when I get in the field, I want what's going to be the easiest, fastest way to get to the different places I want to explore and hunt. So I'll outline different areas in different colors and kind of have it as zone 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. I also will draw in the roads. What's the best way to get between all of these places? Because again, when you're out in the field and you've saved your maps to offline mode, sometimes it's hard to delineate where is the right road and are we going to take the correct way to get there. And then next thing you know, you find yourself kind of getting lost and wasting time. So
Yeah,
I'll draw in roads. I do it in like a dark purple color, and they're just a static line that stays on my map. And I can know unequivocally these are the right ways to get to where I want to go. It's no guessing. Um, and then from there, like after I've done a lot of that, if you can do it, if you're capable and you have the time, getting boots on the ground is absolute game changer, mostly from a validation standpoint. So I did two things. Myself and Logan and Matt went out there in July. We put down some trail cameras.
I think was it Martin?
Martin, sorry,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're good.
my bad. Yeah, me, Martin, and Logan went out there in July. We went to these targeted zones and we dropped cameras in 3 of the 5 zones I identified. The other thing we did was validate intel and data we weren't familiar with. What I mean by that is like on Onyx, a lot of times it will show as a road between point A and point B. But what it doesn't necessarily always capture is what type of road is it?
Mhm.
Is that road actually open and passable? Is it closed? Or has something changed where the software hasn't updated it because the county didn't update it? There's a lot of variables there. That was so valuable because there's a few different scenarios where what I thought would have been a road to pass through from point A to point B would have been very convenient, and that didn't exist. So on my computer and doing e-scouting, it existed, but then in the field, it certainly did not. So that whole thing was great. We glassed a bunch. We saw elk. We saw some nice bulls.
That's all. That's got to right there. Just all right. Like it's go time.
For sure.
Like that to me is a switch in the story, right? Like you're doing all this homework. Let's call it homework.
Yep.
And then you go to take a little pop quiz, and you get out there and you find out. You set trail cameras. You're finding sign. You're glassing elk. You're like, okay, I'm ready for the test. Like
Most definitely. So like to your point, when we were setting cameras, we didn't have a point that we were headed to per se. We were just kind of exploring. We were looking for old rubs, that
Yep.
historically would tell a story that bulls have been in there during the rut or pre-rut. We were looking for access points. We were looking for water. We were just looking for any kind of sign, obviously live elk, the whole nine. How would we approach set areas? What's the best place to park versus if we were to go do a bivy camp setup, like what route would we take? Just a lot of things that easier to identify in person than on the map pre-scouting. It's gotten better because this was a few years ago, so some of the 3D imagery is certainly helpful, but even just the density of like trees and stuff is hard to really grasp until you get boots on the ground. And then you can be like, all right, well, this area looks like it'd be a good area. However, not super keen to glassing compared to zone 3, much more open, much more conducive to glassing. We would probably want to have a spotting scope with us when we go on this one versus zone 1 is just thick timber. All you need your binos. We're going to be doing a lot of calling and sound checking. That's the strategy here because you can't see anything beyond 50 yards.
Yeah, and you kind of you gauge the temperature of the elk or what the rut is doing, and you would hunt those places based on that. Like, let's say it's super hot, 0 rut action. You probably wouldn't want to spend all your time still hunting through pine trees.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a huge kind of takeaway that might have been glossed over a little bit for some hunters going out to scout like right now. Like kind of start making some mental notes on some of that stuff. Like, okay, this spot obviously has rubs, it has water. It might be a transition area, which I love hunting transition areas, whether it's thick timber to sage or thick timber to meadows or something. Kind of be making mental notes like, okay, this spot is a rut spot. Like, this is a great spot to hunt during the rut. And then other places where it's like, okay, these are giant slopes. I have some open, like, feeding or grazing pastures that I'd be able to glass these elk in. And I'd be hunting them more like a mule deer if the rut is not happening. So I think that's something that might not be talked about a whole lot. And I think it's kind of a hard pill to swallow because a lot of us or you guys at home might block a week out, right? And you're like, okay, I'm going to go hunt elk. And in your mind, you're taking your bugle tube, you're taking your binos, and you're just bombing it. But what happens if there's not a cow in heat?
Well, the best advice I could give for folks going out west to hunt elk, particularly if you haven't done it before, is have a lot of options, be nimble. Don't get hung up on the fact that the place that you scouted and it looks great, or even maybe you went there and you saw some stuff in a pre-scouting trip. Don't get hung up because if the elk aren't there, they're just not there. So you got to find alternatives. And I think sometimes folks that may come out elk hunting may get a little bit too hung up on, well, I really just, this is where I was going to hunt. So they just stay there. And you can't hunt elk that aren't currently there. They could have been there. They might be coming back there. But if they're not there, it's best to go find them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's precisely why I identified 5 different unique zones that weren't necessarily close to each other. And you'll kind of see as the story unfolds, we end up leveraging almost all of them in the process. But being nimble and not getting predetermined, hung up in a spot that you think is good is very important. More than ever, too, because so many people are willing to hike in miles and miles and miles. And I would just say, that's why I'm such a proponent of spending a day or two scouting before you hunt is so much more valuable than just showing up and hunting.
Exactly. I would
right?
100% agree.
If I had to pick, you get 2 days to scout and 3 days to hunt, or you get 5 days to hunt, I would pick the first one because you can learn so much in 2 days. A lot of times just eliminating places, right? Like, okay, there's no elk here, didn't see any sign here, move on, time to go to the next spot. And so the value of that is just so apparent. And then, it just makes those 3 days of hunting that much more effective when you can really zero in on where are these elk, because elk are living in different spots throughout the year. Their summer range, when the bulls are in velvet,
bachelored up,
they're kind of hanging out, is very different. And then around the middle of August, depending on what state you're at and where you're at, you'll start seeing most bulls strip in their velvet. Gosh, anywhere between August 15th and the 20th is a pretty common time frame. And as soon as that velvet gets peeled, they're moving into a different zone. They're transitioning into their pre-rut zone. Their testosterone level spikes. Their whole entire demeanor changes. They start getting further out of bachelor groups and more independent. They start, in many cases, I've heard them bugle in the summertime.
Yep.
When they're in velvet and at the transition point of out of velvet, and they're just starting to probe.
Yeah.
They're changing. They're different.
Testing the waters. My experience, exactly what you said. Those dates are pretty spot on in my brain from running trail cameras and hunting. That time frame is, once they strip that velvet, they don't necessarily go full bugle fest, but they're definitely splitting up from all their buddies and they're going out and maybe not every day, but every couple days they're going to check some cows at night, just like anybody in heat yet? Alrighty, I'll be back in a day or two, and they're not going far, but they're a lot of times holding up in some of these nasty canyons. And like BMAC has said, like if you're stuck hunting one spot, like let's say you have this beautiful meadow with a wallow and pine trees in your brain, you're like, okay, this is elky. There's rubs there, but for whatever reason, like the fall equinox, right? Like the moon phases are off, or it's super hot, or it's a drought. All these factors add up in when a cow actually goes into estrus. And that's by far the biggest factor in the elk rut. It just takes one cow to go into heat. And I mean, it's
The
go time.
woods could explode
Yeah.
for sure.
And I mean, if that day's off by 2 to 5 days, I mean, people's hunts are host if they're stuck in that one spot.
Yep.
You know?
And to be clear too, like in a different area, 5 miles away, there could be a cow that is in estrus, and the dynamic of that area is different than the one you were just in. And I think sometimes we generalize like, oh, the rut's just not on yet.
Yeah.
But to me, it's very much geared towards the dynamic of each little herd group
I agree.
of how whether or not it's on or if it's not. Because I know there's been times where we've been out hunting and it was really great for somebody that was split off in one area, but it wasn't that great for another group. And we're within the same general unit, but there's just different dynamics. So leading up to this particular day, opening day was September 1st. We did our scouting, obviously, in July. We showed up a day early. Didn't have time to go check all the trail cameras and everything, but we picked a spot, and it just so happened to be during Labor Day. So I strategically didn't go to my number one spot, thinking that there's a good chance there's going to be more people during a busier weekend. So let's go kind of check the box off on a different area that I had interest in, but didn't know as much about. So that's kind of what led us to the very first initial spot we checked out. Lo and behold, we got in there, we saw some sign and stuff, but it didn't really materialize and pan out. Didn't see any fresh signs, certainly didn't hear any bugles. Again, being at early September, sometimes, your expectations might be a little bit low, but you never know. You can always hear elk bugle and things can always happen. So the first spot didn't materialize, which led us to our second spot. And the second spot, we had an opportunity to pack up the packs, and I wanted to do like a 3 or 4 day bivvy loop.
Okay.
So kind of had a predetermined loop or route that I was interested in exploring. This is in an area that has more timber cover. You can kind of see if you're watching the videos. It's a little bit thicker, but it was good. We got into some action. We had our first bugle of the trip, which is always encouraging, considering it would have been probably September 1st or 2nd. All younger bulls. In this area, I had also set up a trail camera, so it gave us a chance to go look at that one. And what I realized was kind of what I talked about earlier. We had found a lot of summer elk zones. So I had a lot of bulls on camera that were in velvet, and then a lot that were strip in velvet. And then within a day or two of them strip in velvet, no more bulls.
Dude,
So that was a real big indication of, man, I don't think we're in the right place anymore. And you can see we did have some run-ins, but they were all younger, more immature bulls. And while we were transitioning between our first zone and our second zone, I made a couple phone calls and talked to another biologist. And the biologist had mentioned that they had seen and had intel that a lot of the cows were still in these kind of mega summer herds.
yeah,
They hadn't been
mob.
They hadn't been broken up yet into their micro herds. So that kind of just led us to believe that we weren't in the right area for mature bulls. Didn't see any cows to speak of. And then after talking to that biologist and hearing about that, it's like, man, we're just not in their rut zone yet. So the cows are still in their low summer ground. The bulls just left their high kind of summer ground. So there's got to be somewhere, a middle elevation, call it, that's more likely like their rut area or pre-rut area.
Mm-hmm.
This was great, though. It was a lot of fun. If you guys have never bivvy hunted elk, which essentially is you've got everything you need on your pack, you got your food, Your water, there's a lot of water in this unit, so we were able to filter water, no problem there. We didn't have to conserve it or anything, water everywhere. It's such an enjoyable way to chase elk.
Yeah, I personally have never hunted elk that way.
Oh, God, it's my favorite.
I've spike camped, backpacked in and left a camp and kind of hunted the same canyon over and over. But man, oh man, is there times where I get down in these deep canyons where I'm like, I wish I had my sleeping bag.
That's the beauty. I think there's very few people that I know of that can just forget the fact of where they are in relation to the truck or in relation to if I killed an elk, how do I get it out? Without having some hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
And being in a group and having everything on your back, it's so fun because that, last light bugle where you got 15 or 20 minutes left to light, the elk is another 500-600 yards in the wrong direction of where your base camp is or your truck. You just don't even think about it. You just go right at them.
Dang, that's dangerous.
And then if it doesn't work out and it gets dark, you just make camp.
Dangerous for the elk. Yeah, that is definitely sounds like the apex way to hunt these things, because anytime I've ever hunted elk, or I even think back to guiding, like, you just got to move.
Yeah.
When the elk are talking, you need to be moving,
Yeah,
And
it's covering country. The Born and Raised guys is who we've done it with the most. If you guys ever watched the Land of the Free series, we got an opportunity to do that. The one that stands out to me is our Montana hunt with those guys,
yeah,
where we just were a mobile elk hunting unit. It was a really successful hunt series. I think we went 4 for 5. I should have killed a bull too and slapped my arrow like right off the side of a tree that looked like it was just headed right to the zone.
just for the promised land, dude.
And just got my hopes and dreams crushed. But that was such a fun hunt. And Trevor's bull, the only reason we killed Trevor's bull on that series was because we had camp on our back.
So when are we doing that again?
Dude, tell me about it. I'm so amped to do that.
Let's go.
I will say though, it's not the only way to do it. There's plenty of places that we've hunted where it doesn't even make sense.
Well,
You're way more effective in a vehicle than you would be hiking around aimlessly. So pick and choose like where you want to take advantage of that. But from a pure enjoyment standpoint, I'd argue that it's some of the most fun.
I've heard Corey Jacobson say it a number of times. He's killed majority of his elk within a mile of a paved road.
Yeah, from what I know of Corey, I don't know Corey super well, but he does a lot of sound checking,
Yeah.
a lot covering country, and then capitalizes, from what that has helped him identify.
He wants to hunt elk that are bugling, and he's just going to keep casting until he gets one to respond.
Which, think about strategy when it comes to elk. The bugling thing is very, very fun.
Yeah.
With hunting with Born and Raised, and when we were the tag holders, their motto, and since they were hosting us, we abided, was if it's a legal bull, you're shooting it if you're the shooter. So you can't be picky, right? If you want to try to capture maybe a little bit more older, mature bull, you want to go for a score or something like that, you don't necessarily have the luxury of that. If you're the shooter and it's legal, you better be flinging an arrow, which is great.
Yeah.
We had a good time doing that. That is their strategy, is the cat road shuffle. This cover country, bugle, 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 bugle. You're going to probably move through a lot of elk that aren't responding. Eventually, you're going to push towards and get to a situation where a bull is going to respond, and you try to kill that bull if it's legal. That's their scenario. Corey's is a little different. Corey and Dirk spent a lot of years doing like the truck routine, sound checking, learning what they could learn.
Some
Boom.
night ops.
Night ops, jumping out and coming back in the morning.
Yep.
Going after where they had heard a bugle, lo and behold, boom.
Yeah.
Shooting an elk. Then you got other guys like come to mind like a Ryan Lampers or like a Stephen Drake, where those guys are not leveraging the calls too much. Maybe a location situation, but then once they've identified, in many cases, a herd bull, it's typically what they're going after, they just go straight stock
Just
stealth
ninja,
mode, straight ninja mode. And they've both killed a lot of really nice bulls utilizing that strategy of no calls. They're letting the bull do the work. They're sneaking in.
It's Randy Ulmer, dude.
Right? Like, so there's a lot of ways to go about archery elk hunting. All can be effective. All are fun. Just a matter of how you want to go towards it. So
A lot of ways to skin the cat.
absolutely. I think so much of hunting is objectives and methods, right? The objective is to fill your tag, and the methods of getting you there Everybody's going to have a different approach. But I've been lucky enough to try to do a little bit of all of them. I like all of them equally. It's hard to beat a bugle and bull
Yeah.
coming in,
Yeah.
especially if it's a older class, mature shooter. Like that's as good as it gets. But as fall, progresses, sometimes those older herd bulls get a little more wily. They're not able to get called in as frequently. They got a lot of cows around them, which is why going kind of stealth stock mode can
Yeah.
be super effective.
Yeah, you kind of have to play the hand you're dealt type of thing, and just this is full circle now, but you got to go into each spot with an open mind.
Yep.
You got to take what the elk are giving you. If you can glass them and they're being quiet, ninja mode, If they're bugling their face off and it's thick, just flipping hammer down, dude. So you go to your second spot, you call in some smaller bulls, you get in contact with the biologist. Biologist says they're still in monster herds, which that's super common early season. What now? What are you guys thinking? You're like, okay, we got to go lower?
There's like a funny clip in this video of me and Casey sitting around the fire right there, just so dejected, just getting our butts kicked. And we were kind of talking through what's the move. So we'd been to spot 1. On the way to, this is technically spot 3, we stopped in spot 2, checked trail cameras. Again, similar outcome as spots 3 camera check, which was a lot of bulls in the summer, catching bulls, rubbing their velvet, no more bulls. Same thing with the spot we're in, right? Defeat. We were, we're just trying to put the puzzle pieces together of where are these more mature bulls in this unit. So here, Casey is literally strategizing the whole concept of summer bull elk up higher, summer cow elk down lower. We got to try to meet in the middle for like the rut season.
Yep.
And so that finally led me back to like, let's go to our number 1 spot. So the holiday had kind of surpassed. We're midweek now.
Yeah. What are you, day 3, 4?
Got to be day 3 or 4 by this point in time. And so we were like, all right, let's do this. And I honestly said this here. I said, at this point in time, I'm kind of considering this like a scouting mission.
Yeah.
Because we had the whole entire month and I was going to hunt every second I could.
Yeah, BMAC goes hard in the paint. Like if you guys haven't seen Drawn Out, or we were hunting Arizona a little bit last year, like this is a huge takeaway, and I can't harp on it enough. You look at Eric, you look at BMAC, you look at Casey, these guys kill consistently. And it's just the one thing they all have in common, and they're successful year in and year out, is these guys spend time in the field and just keep hunting. And I've learned that, and it's something, I don't know why, as a fan or a viewer, I never thought of that. I was just like, oh, it must be nice to hunt for a living, or it must be nice to just have these good tags, or hunt these good areas, or have this good intel. But the more I've hunted with you guys, going on 3rd season, I'm like, dude, a lot of times when I'm like, man, I'm ready to go home, And granted, it might be a touch different, not being the tag holder, but man, I'm ready just to call her quits. We gave her hell, but it's like, we hunted Idaho 17 or 18 days. You hunted 19 days.
19
I was
days.
out there 14 days, maybe.
Yep.
And I mean, that's a lot of days, no matter the style, bivvy style, truck hunting, public, private, guided, non-guided, flipping, anything, premium, general tags. Like, I don't care who you are or what you're hunting, 19 days. I think that's a small percentage of the hunting community.
Well, some people just aren't in a position where they could.
And I definitely see that.
Right. They would love to.
And I know that's going to be a lot of people saying that in their brains. I've been there. I've worked at the body shop. I've worked at the cabinet shop.
Dude, I can relate, man.
Yeah,
I had 2 weeks of vacation for 20 years of my life.
Exactly, right? And you're looking
including working with Casey and Eric at Hush. So many of the hunts from 2013 up to 2018, I couldn't go.
Yeah.
I didn't have the time. I would get a few days here, a few days there. You got to balance and juggle. Like, okay, well, I got to take the wife on a vacation. I want to take the wife on a vacation. Let me rephrase that. Uh, and then you maybe have a tag or two, so I can do like a couple, 3 or 4 days here, and then I could do like this other hunt, a couple, 3 or 4 days here, and I just didn't have the luxury of time. Casey and Eric had the luxury of time because Eric was doing our Hush thing full time, and then Casey had more autonomy with the business he was running, and also moonlighting with Hush. So I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, dude. It's
And
tough, but
but
a lot of days in the field is still a lot of days in the field.
yes.
Something I guess I'd never really thought much about. Eric always, in my mind, is like the epitome of what you mentioned. Like he is gonna go and go and go and go and go until he either fills his tag or the season's over.
Yep.
And I have so much respect for the effort that he puts forth and trying to remain optimistic and positive. And I would say, Casey has demonstrated that time and time again as well. He's coined the phrase time and pressure, which became a film of ours many years ago that's done super well, which is the whole notion of if you put in enough time and you apply enough pressure, you're going to eventually have success on filling your tag.
Yep.
And that can be said about a lot of things. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of time, or sometimes you maybe lose the motivation to apply pressure.
Yeah.
Right? But without a doubt, if you're able to do that, something's going to give, at least for an opportunity.
Yep.
And so the greatest thing too about hunting with Casey and Eric and Matt and Logan is the amount of positive reinforcement, encouragement that everybody gives one another. That's why I love our group. We've always tried to come from a place of positivity, try to uplift each other, because there can be a lot of pressure when you are the tag holder. I feel it often. Matt and Logan have young families, and a lot of times they're out following me around for longer times than we would hope.
Yep.
And, Casey and Eric have tags of their own. And so when everybody's there trying to help me, there's like pressure I put on myself that I want to have success from everybody's, investment of their time, the sacrifice of not doing things that maybe they would want to do, try to help me out. And so that is probably the hardest part about who gets what tags is when you are the tag holder and you got everybody there trying to help you, and then the hunt just becomes difficult for whatever reason. It's just like, dude, I'm so sorry, guys. Like, this is taking a really long time. We're putting in a lot of effort. We're doing everything we know how to do, but sometimes it just doesn't materialize. We've had the flip side, where hunts happen pretty quick, and you get out there, you get lucky or whatever. You know the unit, your opportunity strikes within a day or two. But man, last year, for whatever reason, and in years past, we've had times where it just does not give you anything to take advantage of until maybe the end of the hunt, or maybe it just doesn't materialize. And I feel so bad. I'm just like, gosh, man, these guys are out here with me. They're not the tag holder, which is inevitably not quite as fun. I really enjoy being on other people's hunts, but at the same time, it's not the same when it's not your tag, even if it is your job. And so I have empathy for all that. But back to this Wyoming hunt, like both Logan and Casey were just positive. Like, dude, let's just keep growing. Even when I was saying, hey, this is probably an extended scouting trip based on what we're seeing now, we said, hey, let's go do one more 3 or 4 day bivvy hunt back to our number one zone midweek. Shouldn't be any traffic there. And let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Keep a positive hunting attitude. PHA.
PHA, man.
That's what we did.
Yeah, and I can't think of two more selfless dudes or like positive dudes than Casey and Logan. And I mean, I'm just putting myself in your shoe. Like, my hunt hasn't even started yet. I know people might be getting sick of me talking about this dang deer tag, but I'm already feeling like
Anxious
and the pressure, man.
I know.
I'm like, shoot, dude. Like, I don't want it to take 5 or whatever days. Like, I want to be able to like get in, find a bull, find a buck, surgical, kill it, get Logan home. get time to go try and film Eric on his tags, and it's like in my brain, it's already like weighing on me. I'm like, dude, I haven't even set foot on the mountain.
We've talked to a lot of people that have had, great tags on paper. Trent and the Born and Raised crew have drawn some really great tags recently. They all felt that pressure. I would just say if you have a good tag and you're bringing people with you to help, don't let anybody else dictate the pace of what you want to experience.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, it is your only time in your life you're going to get to do something like this on this particular tag, just because of the nature of how difficult tags are getting. I used to feel a lot like that too, where it's like, God, if it was just me, there was no cameras, dude, I would be out here 8 hours trying to achieve this particular stock.
Yeah.
But it's going to be really boring for the guys that are with me. Oh, maybe I'll just try to do the best I can. If I bump it, whatever, we'll keep hunting. I think it's important to not worry about that. Only because hopefully you're bringing people with you on these hunts if you draw one of these great tags that are truly there to help you out, that they get it. And they're going to be like, hey, don't worry about me.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be some days that are long and some hikes that are steep, some nights that are late, but that's all why I'm here, right? Just to support you or whoever drew the tag. And I've been able to, I would say, enjoy some of these tags the last couple of years, more so having that mentality than worrying about everybody behind that's helping.
Yeah, you got that matured mindset, I would say.
And just, again, it's all out of empathy towards the guys that are hanging out and helping me. Like, I want to not waste their time and whatnot, but I think it creates a situation where you could rush through a great opportunity. And then what happens if you don't capitalize? It may be days till you get another one. So in this event, though, man, Casey and Logan were so supportive. And they were right alongside me trying to figure out how these puzzle pieces connected.
Just a Rubik's Cube of the elk hunt.
So we're on the 6th of September, which by all accounts is very early still in the cycle of a rut. But I'll kind of frame what happened. Like we're going into our spot that we wanted to get to. We're unloading the truck. Our packs are just getting strapped on, and Casey heard a bugle. And then he picked up his binos and immediately pegged the bull. And it was middle of the day, probably 3 o'clock maybe, hot, low 80s. And one of my fatal flaws is overthinking shit too much.
Yeah, what's perfection paralysis?
Yes. So there's been countless times when Casey has been in my ear saying, dude, just go.
Yeah.
Don't. And it is like a perfection thing. Oh, what's the perfect way to get in there? And so there's this balance between being aggressive and being patient. And I think I probably lean on the patience pendulum a little more so than the aggressive pendulum. Whereas I would counter and say Eric leans way more on the aggressive pendulum than the patience one. And so that's a challenge that I want to continually try to overcome. So we get into this spot and it's middle of the day and Casey's like, dude, let's leave our stuff and let's go. That bull is primed to be called in. Middle of the day, it's hot. He's bugling. Let's roll. And we had been able to identify kind of where we thought he was. And so we just left everything and went. And so we tried to call this bull in and we called in a calf. Casey did. And so Casey was dropped back, that classic kind of 80 to 100 yards. And Logan and I were up a little further. It was starting to get a little stormy. And so there's some other winds and stuff happening. So I don't know if the bull couldn't hear Casey's calls out of the gate, but we decided man, there's a storm coming in. Let's just kind of pause and see if we can wait it out. And we ended up getting pummeled like a true Wyoming thunder, lightning, hail.
Logan is using a cow decoy to shield his head and the camera.
And again, nobody had coats or anything. So we're just in a light merino shirt. It got cold, legitimately cold. But so many times, in the traditional kind of fall mountain weather, a storm could come and go relatively quick. So we just kind of hunkered down, hoping that things would pass.
Yeah.
And again, like Casey just being so positive, like, dude, we're gonna kill this bull once the storm passes.
So pause real quick. I don't want to spoil the story, but the bull you guys initially heard and saw, is this the bull you end up killing, or is it just
I don't know for a
like when he
fact.
pulled up his binos, was like, dude, that's a big bull, or it
There's a
was
big bull.
okay.
Let's go.
Okay.
So Casey might have a different perspective. Side note, he is arguably one of the best glassers that you could ever be around. He's so dang good. Has been since the minute I met him back in 2012. Pause this real quick because I want to just highlight this, but he's just so great at picking apart country. I would say 9.5 out of 10 times he's gonna be the first guy that's like, I got elk, I got deer when we get set up in a new spot. So he's just exceptional.
He's really good at like, what's the word I'm trying, like, sizing the environment. Like he's glassing out there, and it takes me picking up a couple deer and elk to be like, okay, that's the size I'm looking at 2,000 yards. You know, he's just like immediately like, I feel like it's almost like a left brain, right brain thing, where he can look past the trees and the brush, and he's like looking like he's standing right. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but to me, I'm like, I'm painting a broad brush across there, and I'm looking for low hanging fruit. You know, like
So if you guys want to
pop
learn,
of a color.
yeah, I mean, if you want to learn some of his tactics, we just released the 101 series glassing, and he gives like 3 tips to find more game out in the wild. You can check it out exclusively on the Hush mobile app.
Did you guys know that Hush has a brand new mobile app? And it is completely free. Simply search Get Hushin' where you get your apps. It's compatible with the iOS and Android platforms. With the app, you're going to get a lot faster checkout process for those of you who love to shop the Hush brand. We also do app-exclusive content. The only place to get this content is simply on the mobile app, and it's free. And don't forget, we do in-app exclusive giveaways. If you guys want to win some of the great products that you see us use in our videos, check out the mobile app today.
It's completely free, and it's content that does not live anywhere else. So we're going to do a better job building that library. But take a look at it. He's such a great glasser. And yeah, his ability to pick up game at great distances is also uncanny. We call it like werewolf vision. He's got some ridiculous long range vision.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, so he picked up this bull, and it wasn't, I don't think we spent a lot of time like sizing it up. It was just like, that's a mature bull. It's the right time of day. If that thing is bugling this time of day, he's callable. Let's get up there. So we finally make it through the storm. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, it clears off. It's suddenly beautiful out. You got like the steam kind of coming off. And same scenario. Logan and I moved up a little bit further, a little bit more into the kind of broken juniper sagebrush. And then Casey dropped back and started ripping some bugles. The bull immediately responded.
Dang.
And then lead you to the good stuff. If you're visually watching this thing, this is where, again, like we talked about out of the kind of the beginning of this podcast, this is ingrained in my head.
Ooh.
Forever. The crazy thing too, so this bull is skylined himself for the audio folks, and he's just methodically kind of like walking, and then he starts to pick up his speed. He's trotting. The noises coming out of this bull is unlike anything I've ever heard. The lighting's incredible. He's got snot coming out of his nose, and he starts raking a tree in front of us.
How far is this right here?
Probably 40 yards right there, and I was able to come to draw.
When he's raking, clutch move.
Yep, and then I'm following him, and he starts kind of picking up speed again. So I had to stop him. This shot was probably around 35. I just had to guess. But that whole sequence happened so fast and was just the most picturesque thing. But the noise that elk made was outrageous. Pause it right there, Maddie. It was so wild because he was like glunking and kind of like making these whimpers.
Yeah, it's like I've heard it a few times when I've called bulls in that are fired up.
Yep.
And it's like,
So he had ripped a bugle and then appeared on this kind of ridge crest, skylined himself for all of its beauty with the backlit, straight 7 picket fence,
yeah,
gorgeous rack that immediately was like, that's a shooter. And then he just comes in these most unique audible noises. Yeah, just
like almost a light chuckle, but like a glunk and like
it sounded like a
breathing.
dog
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. You don't hear it often. I've been in the elk woods quite a bit, and I've never heard it to that level. I've heard glunking a lot, but these little squeaks and stuff are very interesting.
When I called in that bull that first year in Colorado with Eric, when he was sitting in a tree saddle and I called that bull in, I was hearing that before I could see the bull. I thought a calf or something was coming in.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden he comes up and just screams and keeps coming. I'm like, whoa.
So a couple things to note, like things I've learned elk hunting in the past several years would be when I was with Born and Raised hunting in Oregon during the Land of the Free episode, we were down in the swamp. We had a bull that was just mostly raking and chuckling. Didn't ever bugle, but he was getting super fired up. And he eventually came across out into this open. And my fatal flaw, the mistake I made there, is I didn't stop him. And so when I shot, it's crazy. It was probably, again, around 30, 35 yards, something like that. But by the time I released my arrow to when it hit the bull, that one big elk step was enough to move the arrow placement from like perfect double lung to like liver.
Yeah.
That step was a mistake. And if I could have went back in time, I would have stopped that bull. So number one, I would have had a diaphragm reed in my mouth. And moving forward for eternity, I will always have a diaphragm reed in my mouth when I'm setting up on a call scenario. Second thing is I should have stopped him while at full draw. So I'm at full draw. Yeah.
Yep.
1001, 1002, 1003, boom. And so I learned a little bit from that in the sense that in this scenario, had the diaphragm call, got him stopped. The only other thing I critique myself on, and we get a chance to kind of review footage and film, almost like an athlete, is taking a little bit more time to execute the shot. So in the heat of the moment, I'm able to compose myself, I think, pretty well leading up to the shot. But I think I've had a tendency to rush the shot a touch in this notion that I've built up in my head that the elk is going to, compartmentalize and see what's happening and then subsequently spook before I can get a shot off, which is complete nonsense. These elk are so fired up, and their ability to process what's happening, particularly when you have the wind with you, you just don't need to rush it.
Yeah.
Take your time.
It's not.
Settle into the shot.
Yeah. That is such a valid point that I think isn't talked about very much. It's like, I've killed a couple nice deer at some distance, and I attribute, well, 2 archery deer come to mind. I attribute both of those to shooting a hinge release. You can't, you could punch it if you wanted, but when you're really trying to focus,
Execute the shot.
Yep, I'm at full draw, and I'm like, I catch myself like jerking. I'm like, whoa, like,
slow down,
and let's just pinch those shoulder blades together. And bull 12 rings, and that's not me.
Yeah.
That's the release slowing me down, bringing me back into like present.
It's a great tip. So I would say, when you guys are practicing, either at a 3D target or any target, now I practice with a diaphragm reed in my mouth. I go to full draw, I call, and then it's like settling into the shot, not rushing it.
Yep.
Execute a good shot.
I heard a pretty kind of cool tip from Joel Turner. He said if you record yourself, just set your phone up while you're shooting 4 or 5 arrows, and you're shooting that arrow the same time, like a cadence every time, you're punching the trigger. So if you're at full draw and it's like 1001, 1002, 1001, 1002, you're punching the trigger. It's not a surprise shot. It's absolutely not as good as it could be.
Makes sense.
And in my brain, I'm like, holy crap. So I found myself, shooting thumb button because a hinge is not great in hunting scenarios. I will come out and say that. Like, especially hunting an elk, like in timber, you probably don't want to be shooting a hinge. I'm not saying you can't, but it might not be the most optimal. So I've been like trying to squeeze that trigger as slow as physically possible. And then it's like, then I get in my head, like I start like counting a little bit and it's like, okay, last time I shot like 3 seconds. This time, can I hold it till 4 or 5, just slowly squeezing. And yeah, without diving into shooting too much, but it's like, if you finish with your release hand above your shoulder and it's in a fist, you punch the trigger. If your hand finishes relaxed, it was a surprise shot. It was a clean break. So anyways, that's kind of in the weeds, but
I mean, it's all good stuff though. Like I shoot the Carter Quickie. It's an index release.
Yep.
But I have it positioned. So if you were to go from the palm of your shooting hand up to the very first knuckle joint.
Yep. The crease. Yep.
Crease right there. I have mine short. So when I put my finger over that index release, it creates a 90.
Yep.
And I'm using that as essentially my hinge in a way to avoid having to reach for it, right? And then that's when you get into like slapping the trigger with an index release.
Yep.
Punching it, if you will. So I try to hinge it like so, and then again, just using back muscles. Another great tip I learned from Cody and Jeremiah at Wild Arrow is these newer bows in particular, like really being at full draw with purpose and getting into your back wall, especially at distance and especially holding longer durations. So you're not collapsing. You're not having those false kind of like, oh boy, what's going on?
Jitters.
The jitters.
Yeah.
And being able to keep your pin on the target. That was some stuff that last year I worked a lot on in the off season, which is just being really into the back wall, pulling hard against it when I'm trying to execute a more difficult shot, or I have to be at full draw longer.
Yep.
Instead of collapsing down into it and kind of getting unstable with my left holding arm, the pin starts floating around and then you're just kind of hoping.
Yeah.
Lean into it even harder. Take your time, pull through the shot. So just a couple like anecdotes that I've learned in the heat of the moment over the years past. So practicing with the diaphragm read in your mouth, executing an actual call, focusing on the shot and take it through. So what I think I didn't do the greatest here was that from the time I called until the time the shot went off is faster than I would have wanted if I could redo it.
Yep.
Also, I had to guess the yardage. Happened fast.
That's never ideal.
Not ideal, but pretty much often it happens when you're chasing elk. So certainly try to always range things. Other things that I've learned, man, that are just so helpful over time is trying, when at all possible, to be on your feet, kicking out a good base that doesn't have sticks or weeds or noise or leaves, getting in a position in front of cover opposed to behind cover. A lot of newer hunters will oftentimes try to get behind a bush, when in reality you want to be in front of it. The setup to me in archery hunting is so valuable in your ability to execute a successful ambush.
Dude, one takeaway that I don't know if this was thought out or if it was just like bugle, bull's right there, hurry and get set up. But like you guys set up with the terrain so perfectly, being that you were just on this side of the ridge and that bull was going to have to come into range if he was going to see where that call came from.
Absolutely.
Like that was so thought out and so perfect that it was like,
which is,
you couldn't have picked a better spot.
Huge, right? Like if you're in an open area trying to call across the meadow or something, you're going to experience oftentimes bulls hanging up because they're very visual. So they're going to be like, okay, I don't see anything. I'm not comfortable moving forward. So we had this ridge that was a barrier. So that bull had to come up and over to see it. And then when he came down, it was enough cover scattered around that it wasn't wide open to where he could theoretically pick out where Casey was calling from.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So anyways, we froze the frame, and out of the gate, man, I thought, that bull is going to tip over right in our eyesight.
Well, another clutch thing, not to pause the story again, that you guys did was you immediately cow called.
Oh, yeah.
After the shot. And that's not talked about a whole lot either. Like, if bow, rifle, anything, you shoot an elk, call. A lot of times you can get those bulls to stop and look back.
Yep.
And a lot of times that is make or break on trying to identify where you shot that elk, trying to justify how much time you need to give that elk, or if you need to get another shot in that elk. And I think that's a huge tip that you guys did just subconsciously. Just call after the shot. So sorry, continue.
No, you're good. Yeah. So like in this situation, man, a lot going through the head. From what I can tell from the bright yellow hush flushings that I can see buried into that bull, I'm like, dude, that's such a good shot. Like, thing's going to die right in this beautiful light. Logan's going to capture the most epic sequence we've ever seen in the history of hush. And man, unfortunately, it did not play out like that. And it just goes to show you like how an elk's will to live is really something special. So what it ended up happening is this bull ended up, he was immediately sick. And we were calling, can tell he's got his head up. He's moving and stuff, but you can tell he doesn't feel good. I worked my butt off to try to get another arrow in that thing. And so I was in hot pursuit from the minute that thing turned and started going. Now he's slowed down to like a walk pace. Again, arrow is buried deep with the fletchings sticking out. And I'm just waiting for this thing to tip over. Like, come on, dude, come on. And I'm trying to, sneak down to it. It was really difficult to catch up with it. In the end, I never was able to get another arrow flung. I was always just outside. I was always like 110, 115. And it's a more open country, so we didn't have like the benefit was we could kind of keep eyes on him. The negative was I couldn't close the distance any further.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, Casey's kind of circling. He's meeting me as I'm kind of running. The bull's just walking at a slower pace, but because it's so open, this elk is geared towards finding cover. Again, thank God for Casey and his unbelievable eyeballs. I was a wreck. And I generally am pretty even keeled.
Yeah, you can compose your emotions pretty well.
I've never shook as bad in my life. I'm sure it was a blend of like post-storm being cold, the hype of it, the adrenaline dump happening. I'm glassing trying to find this bull. I can't even see him.
Yeah.
Dude, my binoculars are so shaky. In case he's like, yeah, I got him, dude. He is in a pile of junipers, like an island of junipers. I can see him. He's just standing there with his head down. And lo and behold, like elk were bugling and rutting behind us. But I couldn't see the bull. I could see the pile of junipers he was talking about, but I couldn't focus in on where that elk was. And we are losing light super fast. You can, the footage is so easy to see. I'm just like shaking like I have hypothermia or something. 7:30 at night. And dude, I'm just like starting to second guess everything, right? We were so confident. Casey, Logan, and myself, we all saw the arrow hanging out of this bull. We're just like, dude, you crushed that thing.
Because it wasn't a lack of penetration, it didn't look like.
No, it was, there was maybe like 8 inches of the total arrow that was exposed. So we had full penetration.
Yeah, you had 20 plus inches.
It went through and hit the other shoulder side. And it looked like it was like going to be a heart shot.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like. So again, we were just like, dude, that thing should be dead by now. And he probably traveled like, I don't know, 800 to 1,000 yards across this sage flat into this juniper thicket. And so, man, your heart sinks as the tag holder.
So right then, I know it's been a couple years, right then, what's like going through your brain? You're just like, man, I rushed the shot, or man, I don't understand how that bull's not dying, or just like
I don't understand how that bull's not dying. So I was shooting an Easton Axis arrow with a slick trick broadhead, 125 grain slick trick broadhead. I had shot so much that summer. I had shot my broadheads, well out to 70 yards. I was feeling really confident. So it was more like, man, how's that bull still on its feet?
Yeah.
And at the same time, like dealing with the reality that it didn't die in our sight. Like
Yeah.
the other unique challenge is it ended up hopping a fence and went onto some private.
So that in itself is just like a whole nother layer, especially where like you're filming all of this. Like it's all got to be, not saying that you've ever done anything otherwise, but it's like,
Everything we do, dude, is
yeah,
on the most up and up
yeah,
period because there's too much risk to do
exactly.
anything other than that. So I didn't mention this in my preparation, but I had been fortunate enough to connect with a few different landowners
Yep.
in the unit in the summertime. And I reached out and I introduced myself. I got their contact information. Frankly, I asked, like, do you ever allow trespass fees or anything like that? Or would you allow any of that?
Mm-hmm.
The answer was no, but I tried. And so thankfully I had the contact information. The challenge is there's zero service. It just adds more anxiety. So what we ultimately decided is we're not going to even attempt anything tonight. A, we legally can't. And then B, based on what we just saw unfold over the last, 10 minutes, however long it had been, we're not going to risk bumping that elk.
Yep.
So the decision was made. We are going to sleep on it. We're going to work towards getting hold of the landowner and hope that tomorrow we can go recover it. So dude, it sucks. Again, the whole team dynamic. Casey and Logan have worked so hard to try to help me become successful. Everything went great, but then the shot, although we thought it was great, it didn't materialize in the result that night we were hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to work on the Garmin InReach and I started texting the landowner and I just said, hey, I've shot a bull. I'm pretty confident it's on your property by a couple 100 yards at most. Kid, I have your permission to try to retrieve it in the morning. And it took probably 30 or 40 minutes, but he finally responded back to me and he said, yeah, dude, absolutely. We tried to zero in like where I was. He actually ended up sending out somebody that works for him, which I thought was great. And just, man, yeah, couldn't thank that guy enough for giving us the chance to go fulfill this, recovery process. But that night sucked.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep at all. I mean, dude, I was wide awake at like 2 a.m., like looking at my clock. Can we go get this thing yet? But I will say, like, I've had some unfortunate experiences losing animals, 2 whitetail deer back in 2018. That, dude, I don't even know to this day what happened other than I just didn't execute the shot well. I was shooting lighter arrows. I'd messed around with expandables, which I've since completely gone away from. And, to each their own. No judgment. If it works for you, great. But I've kind of went the opposite way of getting slowly like heavier and heavier each year with the objective of maximum penetration, predominantly for elk. I don't hunt much deer stuff with archery tackle, but so that was weighing on my head. I put so much time and energy into getting better with my shot, thinking through like the scenarios of, okay, if a bull does come, do I have my diaphragm read in my mouth? I'm going to stop it. I think again that the area of judgment I would say is I didn't slow down maybe and subsequently pulled the shot just a skosh.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking an inch or two,
Yep.
not much. So that was weighing on me. But all that said, the way he responded, the fact that Casey had him until dark in that same group of trees and he hadn't moved out of that little juniper patch for a good amount of time had me optimistic. Right? Which my dad always would say, like, think positive. It doesn't cost anymore. That's his little one-liner, right?
Yeah.
So I was just staying positive. Like, dude, it's not ideal. I would have loved to watch that thing tip over. Would have loved to see that. That didn't happen. So we're gonna just stay positive. We got a little bit of rest. Sure enough, bright and early before the sun was up, a gentleman shows up that the landowner had sent out, which I thought was just the coolest thing that they followed through and they did it.
Yeah, and right before sunrise, like he got
It wasn't
out there
like
early.
2 p.m., right?
Yeah.
It was like literally first visual light we were out there.
That's rad.
Which was fantastic. And we went back to where Casey had glassed from. The ironic thing too is we ran into a couple other guys that night that I had bumped into in July scouting. They had cow tags, so they weren't even bull hunting. They had cow tags, and so we ended up sharing a camp with them that night, which was kind of cool because they were able to just bring the level of stress down a little bit. And then a couple of them hadn't ever been a part of like a successful recovery of an elk. So they actually joined us. Two of them joined us, which I thought was really cool. And so we were able to go back to where Casey last saw him, and then just kind of slowly worked our way in there. I had an arrow knocked. Casey is just like, dude, we're finding this bull. So again, so positive, so great. And dude, the greatest sense of relief was coming around this juniper, and there he is. Hadn't moved an inch. Definitely died later in the evening because he was fully rigor mortised up.
And you were the one to see him first?
I saw him first, which was just, man, double arms up, touchdown, right in this patch of junipers.
Dang.
And again, dude, Casey's like honestly just as excited as I am.
The best, dude.
The absolute greatest feeling. We ended up finding, he ended up moving about 5 yards from when Casey last saw him. We found the fletching broke off. And lo and behold, man, he's like everything you would dream of.
Son of a gun.
Just your biggest bull of your life. And like I had mentioned, how I started my hunting career carrying a bow around chasing elk. I had always had this dream of shooting like a true trophy elk with my bow. And this captures everything I could have imagined for the size or quality or age class of bull that I would have hoped for. And then to get it, in that kind of the fashion that we captured it, coming over the ridge, the silhouette, which honestly, people see it and they just think it's like a Photoshop thing. It looks so fake. Yeah, man, it was an incredible experience, incredible hunt. It's everything I could have hoped for on pulling one of those, better than average tags with hopes of, having something come together. It checked every box. I got to bivvy hunt, I got to scout, I got to e-scout, I got to do research. I got to get out there with Casey and Logan and get after it. We got a sick call-in sequence, and I got to recover the greatest bull ever. Always things to learn, always things to improve, but to this day, my biggest bull.
This story is one that, like, I think it just paints a perfect picture of who you are and how you hunt and how you are as a person. Like this hunt, watching this hunt as a fan, the 2-part series, I'm just like, wow, this guy's like got his ducks in a row. He's pretty methodical. He's already talked to landowners, and then like meeting you and you being one of my best friends, it's just like honestly, like a father figure to me, it's just like,
whoa, you call me old?
Kinda, but just such a good example is what I'm trying to say.
Thanks,
It's just like, it's definitely like a level of organization and just clarity that I desire, or I would like to achieve at some point in my life. Is just like, you're able to put things almost like a pen to paper so clearly. Every aspect that I've ever spent with you is just like, you have a point A, point B, it's black and white. BMAC doesn't mince words. He says what he says, and it's just like, this is how it's going to happen. And like, if there's a variable, this is how we're going to address it. And it's just like, I can appreciate that so much. And not even just your hunting aspects, but just business or friendship or anything. And it's just so cool to like be able to talk through this hunt, because just like the Firebolt, just like Braley's hunt, just like Eric's 5 for 5, or any of these hunts that we've talked about, is just like, Casey says it best, like just roller coasters, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is such.
I found myself on plenty of roller coasters when it comes to elk hunting for whatever reason. I appreciate the kind words. I think, I love the business side of Hush.
Yeah.
That's my jam. And I spend a lot of time and energy doing it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't think I'm as good of a hunter as Eric or Casey, But I don't care about that. I think I hunt for, different sentimental reasons that bring me back to my childhood with my dad. And I can enjoy the hell out of a hunt without punching a tag.
Yep.
And not have any regrets or any expectation that I need to fill a tag.
Yep.
So I'm not going to be the guy that's going to kill the most animals. Not going to be the guy that kills the biggest animals. Doesn't mean I don't love it as much.
Yeah.
But I just think, we're all wired a little bit different. And so I really cherish these times when I'm able to have a hunt come together and everything works out. And I'm with some of my closest friends. And, they've sacrificed their time and their energy to try to help me fill a tag. Even though, like, I kind of feel like out of the three, I'm the third guy on the rung when it comes to, talent of hunting or the ability to just spend the more time in the field. I'm the least of the three of us in that category, but that's okay. Like, that's why our business has always worked. That's why this partnership has worked. Then we bring in guys like Logan and Matt who are super talented and trying to give them more opportunities to hunt and stuff. So I definitely cherish these kind of hunts. I don't have a ton of them on the channel, but there's a handful that I really cherish. This is definitely one of the top. And I think mostly because just the amount of energy and effort that went into the preparation of it and what I probably lack for maybe killer instinct or aggressive assertiveness while out in the field, I try to make up for in my planning, my organization, my preparation, and pre-scouting. So hopefully when we get in the field, at least I'm going to have some semblance of a plan or a system of plans to put in place, even though I might not be as good in the field. Like that's my that's my strength, I guess.
You make up for it with all the pre-hunt homework.
The strategy
yeah.
of it.
So where was the bull hit? Were you able to
what's a great thing?
it back and like?
That's a regret we didn't do, was dissect the components of where exactly it was. And I don't know why we didn't do that other than it was starting to get warm and we just broke the bull down.
Well, you had a group of people that
We had a
were
group of
standing
people
around.
there.
You're like, let's start chopping this thing up.
And so that is a regret because I have had that question asked quite a bit. Like, where was it, on the elk to learn from that?
If I had to guess,
Yeah, please. You guess and then I'll tell you what I think.
Okay. I would guess that from the angle of the shot and the penetration, I would have guessed that you clipped somewhere on the front of the lungs, kind of. It's almost hard to explain, but like almost a higher or middle part of the front of the lung to where there wasn't a whole lot of blood on the ground, but he might have internally slowly been filling up with blood. That would be my guess. What's your...
I'm pretty aligned with you on that. If it was 2 inches to the right, I think it would have been right in the heart.
Yeah.
Guts were further back. It wasn't guts. Could have touched portion of the stomach.
Yeah.
But I think that low, maybe even a single lung possibly.
Yep.
Into the opposite shoulder, right behind the heart. I mean, it goes to show you that those little inches matter between. And he actually, we didn't blood trail because we could see him visually, but I crossed his blood. It was a decent blood trail.
Okay.
At the 5 or 10 yards I saw it. So I don't know how it was the entire way leading up to him.
Then I would definitely say somewhere in the lung if there was
blood. Yeah. I mean, but dang, dude, it just, we've had so many scenarios. Casey shot a bull back in 2014. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Wasn't able to recover it. Somebody found it. He was able to recover the antlers, but 2+ full days of search in this area. We have video of it. Dude, it was perfect. I mean, and then you see other situations where maybe a bull shot dead nuts in the guts and it freaking tips over in 5 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So who the heck knows? We've talked a lot about shot placement over the years. I killed a bull this most recent year, just last year in 2022, that we were fortunate enough to watch tip over. And that was like higher lung.
Yep.
Crush fest.
Crushed.
Pass through. Dude, he went 15, 20 yards tops.
Yep.
Did a 360, tipped over. Braylee killed her bull It was a 6.5. It was a rifle, a little bit different, but right up the shoulder. So perfect, like kind of heart lung triangle zone. Dude, that thing was dead in seconds from a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yep.
Gage, when we first met you, Maddie, he shot again right up that shoulder. Perfect
placement.
Perfect placement. That thing didn't go 100 yards.
Yeah.
So I don't know. As I've, continually practiced, and I like, this time of year is like prime time practice leading up to archery season. We had your brother Jed print out like a full size elk with a very opaque outline of where heart, lungs, liver would be.
Yeah, you can't see the vitals till you're a foot away from it, basically.
Yeah, and so it's basically printed on the same kind of material as like a realtor sign. So like plastic corrugated material. It's a full-size elk. It's printed in full color. You can buy them from some different companies that are more expensive. We just did it, and it was like $26 at the local print shop.
Yep.
That thing that's my favorite way to practice leading into elk season. The reason I say that is shooting at like a block target or something like that with just a circle is great for zeroing in, your setup, and it's better than nothing. Shooting at a 3D target is fun, but you can clearly see the foam insert. And I would also say it's not anatomically correct of where certain parts of vitals are when you're shooting those 3D targets.
I would agree, and I would say they're not really to scale either, unless you get one of those like giant Delta McKenzie, like whitetail looking targets,
Yeah, and so there's I love the Total Archery Challenge events where you can get a different kind of, angles and such. They're much more realistic than just shooting on a flat surface in your backyard. But the full-size cutout is so awesome because you have to pick a spot. And when you're back at 40, 50, 60 yards, you can't really see the grouping of your shots until you walk up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just helps prove like if you're doing a good job of picking the right zone. And so I've kind of slid the aiming point back a touch. So not as flirty with the front shoulder, which is more on point of what I would have done on this Wyoming hunt, a little too close to the shoulder. And so because where I was aiming, if I'm just a little off the heart or maybe a touch low, we recovered the bull, but certainly wasn't as lethal as other shots could have been.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you say that because I have a picture here I'm going to pull.
And so last year's hunt really just made me believe that even more. It was, I went a little forward of center mass, and if you were to take the crosshairs of perfectly horizontal through, like the midsection of an elk, just a touch high, lethal from effective standpoint.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I have another friend of mine who had almost an identical shot last year with identical results. So the setup that I switched to, last year I was shooting the Easton Axis arrow, had like a half out 50 grain outsert or whatever you want to call it on the tip, and then the Valkyrie Black Eagle.
Deep
there
impact.
You go. Yeah, they were the short Blood Eagles or whatnot.
Okay.
And killed axis deer, elk, great penetration pass through. More expensive. We've got a 101 segment coming out on our app here later this week where we're going to talk through kind of our arrow setups. But yeah, you can kind of see if you're watching on the visual side of it, Matt pulled up the anatomy of an elk. Go back to that one real quick. So you can kind of see like so if we were talking about Braley shot or Gage's shot right up the leg, you can see now point out, Matt, like the bone component.
Okay, so as you come up, this is their lower leg bone. This is like what you would call their femur, and then their scapula up here.
So the femur really projects almost a 45 angle towards their neck, and then the scapula kind of comes up at a 90, but then flares out. And the elk scapula has a pretty thick ridge down a portion of the middle of it. Yep. And then it splays out a little bit to the right side, so towards their head if the bull's, facing that direction, where the bone density isn't quite as thick. And then the true, scapula towards the vitals is a little wider. That zone gets a lot of bow hunters.
Yeah, let me go back to this picture real quick. I think this is a mistake made by a lot of hunters. So if you're looking right here and you can see my mouse, you can see where the elk's hide goes from this dark to this light right here. A lot of people would say this is the point of the shoulder, like right in this zone. So as I go back to this photo, and you're looking at the light to dark and the point of the shoulder, that's like probably right in this zone.
And
And
obviously that's going to vary based on the position of the elk and things
the
a
way
little
their
bit.
legs forward or not. But this is where I've told hunters time and time again, like I've had the privilege to legitimately call in over 100 bull elk and see them die. And I would say that 99% of the time with archery equipment, people are aiming here.
Yep.
Right here. And like you said, if their legs back, if they crouch, they hear that arrow coming. I mean, you could have a lot of front of center, a pretty dang heavy arrow. And if you're hitting this ridge or anywhere close to this ridge within a couple inches,
it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
You might punch through and get one lung. You might not get any penetration if you have a lighter setup. But if I had to speculate on mine, I'm guessing it would have landed somewhere maybe right in there.
Yeah, this is
so like a part of the bottom of the lung.
Yep.
Not the gut paunch. Maybe a touch of liver, just back from the heart. Literally, such a small amount distance back from the heart. But if you look at this too, the other interesting thing is if you took a line and went directly horizontally from the tail to the neck, you'll see like there's a good amount of lung mass above that center line.
This is exactly where you hit your bull last year, right in here, I think.
Yeah.
And you were shooting up, so I think you hit this
Correct.
front lung here, back lung about here. And when I had clients, I would say take like the lowest part of their stomach, so I would say like right in here, and come straight up to the middle of their body. Right here.
Yeah.
This is where I want an archery hunter to shoot an elk.
Which there's a lot of videos. Eric killed a bull in 2016 on one of our films. Leave that up still. I want to reference that again. And it was somewhere back in this area.
Yep.
So upper kind of back lung. And a lot of people were like, dude, that shot's back. Terrible shot. What are you doing? The bull literally fell down in his eyesight 30 yards away.
I have seen it so many times. This is why I have these screenshots.
Yeah, they're great to study. Like if you guys have never dove into the anatomy of elk, there's plenty of stuff you can find probably through Google searches or online, but definitely look into it. It's so valuable. The other just deadly spot is up that shoulder. Again, the perception is maybe there's a shoulder blade once you kind of get straight up the leg. But Braley's shot would have been right in here. Gage's shot would have been right up there, which is, call it from that knuckle of the elbow, like 10 inches high from that.
Yeah, and that is punching.
So that's kind of like the triangle of death right there. You've got the heart, the lungs all coming together. Another fantastic spot to shoot. As you're in the lower third of the vitals on an elk, though, so like the heart and the bottom of the lungs, if you happen to shoot a little bit further back, low, you're going to run the risk of hitting like the stomach, potentially the guts.
Yep.
Low. Now, if you move that up above that center line on the higher side.
Sorry, I wanted this one up for a second.
Yeah. So if you go up above that center line we talked about from the tail to the neck, right? Still back. Now, dude, you're in the deadly zone.
Yeah, center of center.
Center of center. So
like almost where their hump comes down.
Yep.
And I veered away from mentioning any type of hump or shoulder from clients because I didn't want that to be the last thing they heard me say was right below that hump, because that's that no man's land. You hit above that spinal cord, below the spine. I mean, I've seen elk get hit right here, dump like a freight train,
and then get up
and gone. So I never wanted to mention this hump. I'd always say that lowest part of their belly, go straight up and then center left to right. Like I want you center of center and just let her fly. And this is archery speaking.
For sure.
Rifle, point of the shoulder, flipping
right up the leg.
Fire away.
My opinion, right up the leg.
And like, reload.
Where Braley and Gage shot their elk, do that every time. you've got more, you'd have to measure it or whatever, but you got a little bit more or room for margin. Now he has another photo kind of pulled up from an elk quartering away. And in this instance, I've always been taught to aim for the off leg,
Yep.
right? So if you look at the dot that he has kind of picked, right in a vertical line is the bull's off leg. But if you look at where it is elevation on the elk, so up and down, I mean, it's kind of center.
Yep. And this, I wanted to pull this one up too, talking rifle too, or just like looking at the shoulder. A lot of times people think there's shoulder blade right here. A lot of people are thinking that shoulder blade is up here, comes down and around and kind of cuts back. Like right here, Braley and Gage, Smoke City.
But it was perfectly broadside versus quartered away.
Correct.
And then in this instance, if you were to aim at the crease where your cursor is, you're probably going to catch one lung.
Yep.
Still could be a fatal shot, but you may have more follow-up shots, particularly with a rifle.
Yeah, if you're shooting this elk with a rifle, I'm still saying you're shooting from the shoulder. There's all the bone shrapnel. There's the shock and just the energy of the bullet.
If you take the angle, though, here, up this leg, you're going to get
offside shoulder.
Both lungs.
Offside shoulder.
Complete devastation.
Yep. So this is a lot, kind of took a turn chasing a rabbit here, but I really wanted to like show from the elk I've seen die, the elk I've seen you kill, Eric kill. It's a lot of people are hugging the shoulder.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of room for error when you're flirting with that shoulder blade and you're in front of those lungs a lot of times.
Yep.
Unless you're hitting down here and shooting them in the heart. I mean, you're getting into the brisket and shoulder blade and just muscle. Back here is, I mean, you got rib cage and then you got beach ball size lungs. And I've done it more times than I can count. I take the hide off, I take the rib roll off, I cut in between the ribs before you even cut through the diaphragm. The lungs and heart are still in perfect positions. And you can really see that those lungs come back to this last rib.
Yep.
So your last rib is, I mean, the construction of an elk's body, the rib cage is protecting the lungs.
Yep.
I mean, this last rib is right here. And a lot of times you can see elk's ribs when they're moving or bugling or something. That last rib, I mean, I would be aiming few inches forward of that last rib.
We got to do another kind of a breakdown video. We used to do a lot of them on YouTube years ago, out in the field butchering, how to do a gutless method, things of that nature. And YouTube started flagging it, making it, where they give us warnings and flags and all this stuff. So I think it's something that this fall we'll make an effort to try to do, of kind of breaking down, the anatomy of deer and elk in the situation where, like Matt said, you can kind of almost peel back what's going on. And it's not going to be completely perfect because the elk's not going to be upright. It's going to be, laying down on its side or what have you. But it is interesting to kind of dig around and see what is what and where is where.
Yep.
And how that can translate into making a more effective shot.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm all for putting the odds in your favor. And as far as shooting goes on an elk, an animal the size of a horse and just tough as nails, I'm trying to get all the probability I can get. And lungs is the way to go, in my opinion. And they're the size of a beach ball versus a softball for the heart, and it's like,
I've seen, like, most of my experience with heart shots too is you're going to be around 100 yards on a recovery from a heart shot, whereas many cases with lungs, you're going to be, anywhere from like watching it tip over to 100 yards or less.
Yep.
So I would much rather shoot a double lung than a heart shot.
I agree.
Because you're going to have better blood,
better penetration,
complete pass through in many cases, because you're not horsing around with like the offset shoulder where the heart's going to be, more protected in that area. And just a bigger mass to work with there. And yeah, just most of all of like the double lung stuff has been recovered less than 100 yards, whereas, gosh, the numerous heart shots I've been on, 100 to 120.
Yep. So that's a cool little nugget that I'm excited we dove into a little bit. But like, I mean, every scenario is so different. Every angle so different. Every call in sequence, any stock, it's all so different. And
Well, part of my challenge here is just I was hyper focused on tight shoulder heart
yep,
for the two whitetail deer that I wasn't able to recover, and it didn't help that I was shooting a light arrow with a not ideal broadhead.
yep.
And then for the recovery of this elk, I got lucky and we got it, but it was just a little far back, but it was low.
Yep.
Had I missed the same distance back but up,
Oh,
Smoke
dead in
City.
sight. Yeah.
It would have tipped over literally within 50 yards of Logan and I in the wide open, and it would have been some of the most epic footage we ever got. But I've learned from that. I'm adjusting accordingly. I'm practicing shooting that higher, kind of mid-body lung shot, and then, like I mentioned, was lucky enough to execute it in the field last year, and
It's so sick.
was able to execute it in Hawaii on a couple axis deer. Like that's just how I'm trying to practice with more purpose leading into this fall, and hopefully, moving forward, watch more stuff tip over in eyesight.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's all you can hope for as a hunter, and kind of a little bit into the method to my madness to shooting some mechanical sometimes. I'm like, I err on the side of shooting back, and I mean, I have some ribs back there, but I mean, I want a 2-inch hole instead of a 1-inch hole, and not saying that mechanicals are right I definitely would not hunt elk with mechanicals, and I'm not saying it's right for everybody or every circumstance, but it's kind of interesting when you dive into it a little bit. I mean,
It is, man. It's again, objectives and methods. There's a lot of ways to approach your gear and your setup, your bow, your arrow, your broadhead, how you practice. Everybody's got a little bit of a different tactic. Some people are like, dude, I want to, for deer anyways, I'm going to shoot them right through the shoulders.
yep, and both deer I've killed with my bow in the last 5 years. I mean, I pinned both shoulders together and they died in sight.
Yep. So lots of ways to do it. Elk are big, elk are strong. I hope you guys kind of enjoyed a little walk down memory lane, pulled some nuggets from, what has helped me be successful when I do get an opportunity to take on some of these hunts. I think what you put into a hunt on the front end is going to benefit you of what you get out of it on the back end. And I can live from that experience, man. I've went into hunts without a lot of preparation or thought, and they never seem to materialize quite like the ones where I put in a lot of preparation and a lot of thought. And certainly something I'll continue to do, as I get the opportunity afforded to me.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is the exact conversation I needed before a season and before a big hunt and a tag. And I'm sure many of you, just like me, pick some nuggets throughout this podcast. And if you did, make sure you share it with some friends, maybe your hunting partner, get him hyped up for the season, and kind of maybe something that you learned this podcast, share it with friends and family. And like we've said in the last few podcasts, guys, if you guys are enjoying this, which we've had a lot of great feedback, make sure you guys leave a like or a comment, and make sure you subscribe, because
help us out, man.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by absolutely nobody.
Yeah, no ads.
We're self-funding this thing. And although we have opportunities to improve our frequency and our cadence, we're committed, I think, at this point to do a much better job. We enjoy this. It's hard to capture everything in a video about a particular hunt. We've been wanting to do these hunt stories for probably 3 years now. We finally are starting to share some of them. If you have a particular hunt that you've watched on our YouTube channel that you'd like to have a breakdown happen, kind of dig in beneath all the video and learn maybe more about what took place, what challenges, what anecdotes we took from a positive standpoint, let us know. We'd love to do that. For now, we're just kind of picking some of our favorite hunts, breaking them down, mostly getting us pumped up for the fall season, but obviously hoping to get you guys fired up as well. When it comes to our content, we have some stuff in the pipe we're working on. We are hoping in the month of August coming up, we will have several new elk films to showcase. Really geared to get us excited, to get you guys excited, leading up to our September kind of opening day for elk, even though technically it's a little bit sooner here in Utah for Eric on his elk hunt. And then, like we said earlier, Casey will be going to Alaska. Matt's got an incredible mule deer tag and a lot of other great stuff. So Do us a favor, share it with your friends. Give us some positive reviews. Let us know what else you'd like to have as a breakdown, because it's brought to you by nobody. And we do have a couple internal voiceover ads, I guess. They're not even really an ad. They're just like some partner Hush discount codes that we can share with you guys.
Yeah, it's products
We're gonna-
we believe in, and we want to extend kind of a
Yeah.
discount to you guys. Like,
But none of the companies even know we're doing it. So we're just doing it because we believe in the product, and we'd love to pass on a little savings if you have an inclination to needing something like that. So we're adding that. But aside from that, man, we're going to keep cranking on these podcasts. We are going to continue to do more hunt stories. And we're flirting around with like who else we should have as guests. We've got a list of people that kind of is on our radar. In a perfect world, the guest would be here. I feel like since COVID is done, like the Zoom era, I don't love it. I would much rather have somebody here.
it's just not.
It's not
as
the same.
tangible. Yeah, it's just.
So, anyways, if there's other folks out in the industry that you're familiar with that you'd like us to talk with, we'd be open hearing about that as well. And although the season's coming fast, we're going to have to try to bang out more of these podcasts so we can kind of keep things rolling, even though we'll be out in the field. And the video component of these podcasts, I think, has been a huge addition. We're born and bred on YouTube. That's the origins of our business. I think it's only right that we have a video-based podcast on there. We don't have an incredible studio like a Joe Rogan or, even Benny O'Brien or anything like that. But what we have here with the TVs at the South Slopes office in Eric's shop or Hush North up in Pokey, I think it's pretty dang good. It's not great. We could probably use some other things, but in due time, it'll get there.
Yeah, guys, and so much gratitude. Thanks, guys, for listening. And if you made it this far, you're the man or woman. Or woman.
That's right.
And good luck this season. And I love hearing your guys' stories when we meet you guys just out and about or at the expo or through messages. But shoot straight, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, thanks, guys.